I didn't even want to go. The email showed up in my inbox at exactly 8:55 a.m. The subject said, "Dinner with the Carters, Friday 6 p.m. It was a formal invite from HR with a smiley face, trying to make it seem friendly. After 25 years of helping CoreLogic Dynamics grow from a tiny startup in a rented warehouse into a $288 million global company, this dinner was how they chose to reach out. Not a meeting, not a call with investors, just dinner with the CEO and his family. My name is Abigail, and I was the first person ever hired at CoreLogic. I wasn't just an employee, I was the company back then. We had 2 clients and 1 old printer that jammed all the time. I did everything, set up client systems, handled vendor deals, managed finances, and closed deals that kept us running. Ronald Carter, the founder, used to call me his quiet engine. He said I kept the company going when things nearly fell apart. But recently, things changed. Ronald became distant. He stopped reading my updates. Our weekly meetings turned into short phone calls, and then disappeared altogether. Then came the interns, loud, full of trendy business terms like synergy and disruption, as if they'd invented them. So when I got the dinner invite, I knew something was up. I just didn't know how cold it would be. The restaurant was one of those fancy rooftop places with overpriced food and dim lighting. I wore a navy blouse and the pearl earrings my daughter gave me for Mother's Day. I looked like I always did, professional and ready. Ronald was already there, standing by the table with his wife, Sarah, and their daughter, Frances. Frances looked like she belonged in a magazine, perfect blonde hair, expensive white suit, and a presence that screamed, future CEO. "Abigail," Ronald said, smiling with open arms, "so glad you came." "Wouldn't miss it," I said, sitting down, even though my stomach was tight with nerves. At first, it felt like a typical work dinner, too much wine and fake compliments. Frances asked about the early days of the company, her voice sweet but slightly mocking. "It's funny picturing you all working in a garage or something," she giggled. I smiled politely. It hadn't been funny at the time. Ronald jumped in, trying to be serious. "Actually, Abigail saved the company twice. She got us our first defense contract, that's how we made our first $1 million. Frances smirked. "Well, every company needs its stepping stones." I should have left then, but I stayed. I wanted to see what would happen next. Halfway through dinner, Ronald looked at me seriously. "Abigail," he said, "we've been doing some long-term planning. You've been a huge part of building CoreLogic. Here it comes. But we think it's time for new energy and a fresh vision." I stayed calm. "Frances just finished a leadership program at Stanford," he said proudly. "She has big ideas, blockchain, AI, a new image for the brand." "Impressive," I said. "What's the transition plan?" He seemed relieved. 7 weeks, she'll shadow you, and we'll announce it after the next quarterly call. We've also put together a generous exit package. We want you to feel appreciated." That's when Frances leaned in, holding her fork, eyes sharp and smiling. "Time to step aside, Granny," she said. "We've got it from here." Everything went quiet, even Sarah stopped eating. I looked at Frances for a moment, then smiled. "I completely understand," I said. What they didn't know, what they never thought to check, was that I didn't just help build CoreLogic, I owned a piece of it. They had forgotten, I hadn't. Back in 1990, when the company was barely surviving, Ronald gave me 8% of the company. We couldn't afford raises, and I had just fixed a huge billing error that could have cost us our biggest client. Ronald came into my office, exhausted, and handed me a paper. "Abigail," he said, "I can't pay you what you deserve, but if we make it through this, I want you to have a share." I didn't think much of it at the time. I was tired and hopeful. But years later, when we brought in outside investors, I had a lawyer check everything I'd ever signed. And it turned out, my equity was real. I had ownership, I had voting rights. I never brought it up, I never bragged, I thought I was still part of the company's heart. But CoreLogic changed, Ronald changed. He stopped listening to me and started chasing trends. Buzzwords mattered more than results. Consultants came and went, but the ones who loved Frances's polished image, they stayed. Suddenly, loyalty didn't matter, quiet success didn't matter. Only appearances did. And I didn't look like the future anymore. I was the one who kept investors from walking away when things got tough. I held this company together while Ronald was off relaxing in Napa on sabbaticals. Silence. I know about the Series C dilution, I said. You're getting the company ready to sell. His eyes widened. How do you know? I've been here long enough to recognize the signs. He didn't deny it, just looked down at the floor. We had to make some tough decisions, he said quietly. The board wants someone new, a fresh story. A story that doesn't include me. He paused. We're offering you a package. I don't want your package, I said as I stood. I want what I've earned. I walked out before he could say another word. Back at my office, I sent Julie an email. I asked her to file provisional patents by the end of the week, not just for our old systems, but for every upgrade I'd ever made. I wasn't trying to hurt the company, I just needed to protect my work. Everything I had built would be legally mine. On Thursday morning, I found Frances at the whiteboard, explaining her new client strategy. I looked closely and nearly laughed. She had copied it almost word for word from a strategy one wrote 5 years ago. She must have dug through the archives. Good. Let her keep digging. While she was looking for shortcuts, I was already planning my next steps. When she noticed me watching, she smiled and said, "I'm just updating your work." It gave me a strong base to start from. "No problem," I said, stepping closer. "Just be sure to give credit. Copying someone's work doesn't look great in quarterly reports." Her smile faded a little. By Friday, people in the IT department had started whispering. Kathy, my operations lead, caught me in the break room, looking worried. "Everyone's uneasy," she whispered. "Frances is making changes that don't make sense, and Ronald's staying quiet." "That's because Ronald isn't really running the company anymore," I said. "He just hasn't figured that out yet." Kathy gave me a serious look. "What are you doing, Abigail?" I smiled. "Setting the table." "For what?" "For the storm," I said, "but don't worry, I'll smile through it." That night, I sat on my porch with a glass of wine and my laptop. The emails were already written. One was for the remaining 5 board members, reminding them I still held equity and that big changes needed full board approval. Another was for Nexra Systems, a company we almost bought last year. I still had a good connection with their CEO. I wanted to meet. The third email was to myself. Subject line, leverage. I was keeping records, just in case. I didn't want a fight, I just wanted recognition. But if they pushed me, they'd learn just how strong I really was. The big announcement came Tuesday morning, a mandatory company meeting. Frances stood on stage with a wireless mic, pacing like a TED speaker. Behind her were slides full of buzzwords: vision, velocity, victory. Ronald introduced her with a big smile and called her a breath of fresh air. Frances smiled like she'd just won a prize. Then she said it. It's time for a new chapter, a younger, leaner, more innovative core logic. There it was, clear and cold. I sat in the second row, arms crossed, watching people shift uncomfortably. Kathy looked shocked. Austin avoided my eyes. Then Frances clicked to the next slide, Organizational Streamlining Plan, Phase 1. I clenched my jaw. The slide listed back-end cuts, outsourced IT, department mergers, legacy management transition. That last one, a fancy way of saying me, without saying my name. After the meeting, Frances caught me in the hallway. She looked calm and confident. "I hope you'll handle this gracefully," she said. "That's what people expect from experienced professionals." I tilted my head. "You mean women who've outlasted 4 CEOs and built the systems this company runs on?" She didn't respond, just smiled like I was overreacting. Later, HR sent me the separation package. It included a big check, an NDA, and a clause requiring me to hand over everything I knew. That was the last straw. I walked into Ronald's office, the papers in hand. He looked like he already knew what was coming. "Abigail," he began. "You let your daughter stand up there and pretend this was all her idea," I said. "You let her call me outdated in front of everyone, and now you expect me to hand over everything like I don't matter?" "It's not like that. It's exactly like that," I cut in. "I'm not signing, not today, not ever." He sighed. "Then you're leaving us no choice." "You're forgetting something," I said, pulling out a document. "I still have a seat on the board. You can't force me out without full approval. That would break our agreement." Ronald went pale. "You think Frances has bold, new ideas," I continued. But they're risky. Cutting back-end support will break our systems, and that shiny automation she keeps pushing, it violates client contracts, and you know that. He leaned back, speechless. I'm not here to destroy the company, I added, but I won't let it take me down either. That night, I met with Kathy and Austin at a quiet diner. I gave them each an envelope. What's this? Kathy asked. Proof, I said. What we created isn't just software, it's protected intellectual property, tracked, documented, and time-stamped. Austin looked up. You're going to sue them? Not unless they force my hand, I said. I just want you both protected. Francis is already planning more cuts, I warned. Kathy nodded. PR is already writing the press release. They're cleaning house before selling the company, I said. They're making CoreLogic look shiny and simple for buyers. Austin asked. Are you going to stop it? No, I said. I'm going to shape it.